Someone who is a violent paedophile or rapist or whatever, they're always going to be a danger. And how we manage them people in society, well, we don't manage them. In prison, someone's whole of life never getting out, they've got nothing to lose.
Prison for me is somewhere where I try all my life to stay away from. You decided that every single day you were going to go and travel to a prison.
The longest I ever spent restraining somebody was 12 hours.
What made Strangeways different to the rest?
He's angry, he's frustrated, so he basically put 6 cuts down his arm.
You mentioned there on the course that there are a variety of different types of prison officers. Some, like yourself, who kind of just did it as a job. What were some of the types of prison officers that you saw, and what was maybe some ineffective ones and effective types of prison officers?
And that was my beef with the prison service. Some managers just didn't manage it in a professional manner. For me, the prison service on that front is not good. There are sexual assaults in prison. A lot of them not what you'd expect.
We're just scratching the surface here, guys. Right, Sam, or Neil Samworth, but Sam as we'll call you. Thank you for coming on the sit down today, pal. First of all, how are you doing and how's lockdown been treating you?
A bit strange for myself, like I say, chronic insomniac, so being stuck at home, the missus a frontline worker. I can't say it's been difficult, but you know, the boredom and things like that, it started to grind a bit. You know, we're really glad, a month ago when they lifted the restrictions a little bit, not visiting anyone, not seeing anyone like a lot of people. Fortunate to have a garden, you know, when we had nice weather. I've got a friend, his missus, 2 kids, they live in a flat. Both were furloughed, so they've basically been stuck in a flat. So when you look at things like that, consider myself quite fortunate.
So for the people that don't know, you've worked in the prison service for a very long time now. You've retired now 4 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, I got finished 4 years ago. Ill health retirement, actually. I was given, which basically means that after various assessments, seeing occupational health, things like that, I was deemed a bit of a crackpot. It was it's called anxiety state, but you know, the occupational health and that, so I'm very concerned about my mental health. That's
something we'll get into later, I'm sure, and how the prison, how the sort of your time at the Strangeways and Forest Bank and things have affected your mental health. But I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you, Sam, right? Prison for me, right, is somewhere where I try all my life to stay away from. If there's one place I don't want to be in my life, is prison. You decided, right, that every single day you were going to go and travel to a prison by choice. What was the thinking behind that, and why? Why?
Having my careers advice at King Edward VII School, Sheffield, basically the advice was going to engineering or join the army. That was it. You know, there weren't a lot of other choice. I did what they call then, all this will be new to you being a young lad, did a YTS, which is a youth training scheme. It was like sort of the modern apprenticeship. So for 2 years I went to college. I went to the engineering industry training board. So you do the hands-on side of engineering, machining, fitting, you know, working with files, saws, things like that. And at college I did a OND, Ordinary National Diploma, which, you know, if you take that, was creditable towards going for a degree. You could then take another course after that, which was degree level. Thing about engineering, you know, when people talk to me about being in a prison service, and I've talked about it myself, it's like I've almost dismissed them 23 years. Engineering, I did some dirty jobs, some dangerous jobs. I saw a couple of people die in engineering. The thing that sticks in my mind the most was, I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember it very clear. He got stuck in a machine, got his arm stuck, it pulled him in. And it took us about 20 minutes to release him. But what this machine were, it was a pair of rollers. So you wouldn't be able to get your hand in. And it was used for polishing kitchen knives. So the knives would be taken down into the rollers like so, and they'd be polished. Anyway, his arm went in. 20 minutes to release him. It basically took all his muscle, sinew, skin up here. Yeah, it was pretty grim. The fact was he kept coming conscious and passing out. We got a couple of lads trying to hold him up, obviously, because he collapsed. And it took about 4 of us, like I said, 20 minutes to get this machine, apart enough to release him, like. So, like I said, a lot of dangerous jobs in engineering.
Do you think that those experiences set you up nicely for for your time in the prison? You've had a lot of experiences. It's all in the book, by the way, which is behind me, Strangeways by Neil Samworth, but Sam. And so I've had a quick read of it. You've sent me over, and there's an abundance of amazing stories. Maybe amazing is not the right word, but unbelievable stories like that. Do you think those tough experiences, you had tough times with your mum passing away, you saw this fella got his arm crushed in the machine, you were homeless. Do you think all these experiences set you up nicely for the time in the prison?
They say that, the best people to go into the prison service are people with life experiences. Now, you don't have to have seen things like that, but obviously quite well travelled or whatever. Saw quite a lot, worked in a lot of different environments and things like that. I'd done my travelling, but it's 1998 and I'm at a bit of a loss. At this point, I'm doing 3 jobs. So, I've got 3 jobs, I'm making a living, but I'm pulling myself in, bit fed up. One of my friends says, I could get you a job working in forensic units. Now, forensic units are mental health units, yeah. You've got high secure prisons that are mental health units. You've got medium secure and you've got low secure. Obviously, the higher the secure, the more dangerous the people you're working with. So because he was a prison officer at that time, he was working for a company in Leicester, fantastic company, ex-prison officers, and it was called NICE, Nursing in Secure Environments. And what they did, they provided staff to support nursing staff in these forensic units, because some of them are quite violent places. So he got me an interview, and how they work is they maybe offer you a couple of shifts, yeah, and then they'll get feedback from the unit where you're working. If you're acting like a bouncer, standing around like this, it's none of that. It was an all-female unit, and this is obviously, you're going into their living space. The best way to describe it, it was like a secure Premier Lodge, yeah, over 2 floors. So they'd all got their own room, TV, bathroom.
And these are all mentally unstable people?
Very much so. All these people have been in high-security prison, extremely violent, quite unmanageable. A lot of them have been in the system like 40 years plus. So, there's no way they're ever getting released.
Did that make them more dangerous at times? Did they ever try to... Because, the idea that they're women, people might automatically think, oh, they'll be harmless. But, I mean, these people have done a lot of time in prison, and just the fact that they're not getting out, does that make them more dangerous and liable to do silly things?
On a mental health front, no, it doesn't. I mean, they've probably been dangerous all their lives, some of them, very unpredictable. In prison... your long-term prisoners, if someone's whole of life never getting out, they've got nothing to lose. If they seriously harm someone, officer or another prisoner, they're spending the rest of their time in jail. The best example of that would be the 2 lads that killed Lee Rigby in London. Very dangerous individuals. They've got whole of life sentences. So... at some point, if someone drops the guard, one of them might end up, the potential's always there. Where with mental health, although they're extremely unwell and can be violent, it's not necessarily directed at somebody. It's just how they are. They can't manage themselves, and, they have violent outbursts and things like that. Very, very sad cases. One of the nurses there said the best thing for me to do would be to pick a couple of files of patients or residents, whatever you want to call them, and have a read up. So they'd all been abused sometime in the past, usually by men. And like I say, it were really sad. But if I give you an example, there was a lass called Marie. She's probably not around anymore, because this was round about 98, 2000, something like that. She was 60 odd. She was as sane as me and you. You could have a conversation with her. She was, at that time, unmedicated. and what she'd done as a 17-year-old. So that's probably, if you think she was 60, maybe go round to 1950s, 1960s. She'd been abused by her parents. So what the court did was put her with her grandparents, and her grandparents carried on abusing her. So when she got to 17, she cut her grandfather's throat, and a stiletto shoe. Do you know what a stiletto shoe is?
Yeah, yep.
So thin heel, stuck that in her grandma's head and killed them both. Looking at the fact she'd been abused or whatever, in modern times, she might well get a manslaughter charge or something like that. If you go back then, she was deemed mentally unwell and at 17 put in a mental institution. So she had been locked up almost 50 years.
Can you blame her for that?
No, of course you can't. Of course you can't. But going back then, people were getting locked up for things that were nothing now, petty crime and things like that. We had a big hospital in Sheffield, mental hospital, it's no longer there now, called Middlewood. One of my friends worked there, and when she worked there was a woman in her 90s who'd been there all her life, and that's because as a child she'd been born out of wedlock. So her mother, a single mum, like now, mum, had had a child. They took a child off her and put her in a mental hospital, the child. People have spent their lives in mental hospitals, and unlike prison, once you're in, there's no date, there's no release date. So like Marie got locked up, if you think someone spent 50 odd years of life in the mental hospital because they killed their abusers, it wouldn't happen now, would it?
It was a female environment with a lot of the female residents or inmates or patients, however you want to call them.
They were all female in that place. There were no men. Very sadly, again, a lot of mental health hospitals, and some still, were mixed. And there's a lot of abuse. Because male mental health patients will abuse female patients. These two units I work were female only. For me, you should have male mental hospitals and female. You should not have mixed wards at all. It's a bad combination. It doesn't take anyone in. Most of the staff were female. You had mental health nurses and you had nurse support workers. And then most of the prison officers who worked there, did it as sort of a sideline. They were male because there was a lass. Again, I can't remember her name. She was a big girl. Maybe almost 6 foot, maybe 20 stone. And I worked there 2 years. She always had 3 big lads. She was 3 to 1 all the time. So 24 hours a day. If she went out into the garden for a cigarette, there were 3 big lads. And when she kicked off, she fought like a man. In prison, you're taught to restrain people, yeah. And you use locks. You use physical locks from martial arts, wrist locks, elbow locks, that sort of thing. In the mental health game, what you do is you try and stop people hurting themselves and stop them hurting you with as least force as possible. So you don't put locks on. So this lass, if she kicked off, she might end up on the floor. You put cushions under her head or whatever. There might be 6 staff to hold her down. And you might stay there for 2 or 3 hours till she calmed down, and then you let her up. The longest I ever spent restraining somebody was 12 hours.
12 hours?
Yeah. Kept changing over because you get aches and pains. You'd be laid on your side with a cushion, talking. You'd let her up. She'd kick off, and you'd have to restrain her for her own protection again. So, very difficult environment to work in. A lot of really, really poorly people.
So you went from there to Forest Bank for your first prison that you worked in. That is a private prison, I think. What was that like going into Forest Bank and that whole experience of going into work as a prison?
Bear in mind I've been about a bit. I was quite terrified when I went for my interview. Remember sitting in the staff car park. So they have an area where you go into the prison. So I got there a good hour early because I came from Sheffield. I travelled up. And I was just sat, looking at the walls, trying to imagine, like yourself, fearful of what went on in there and what I might have to deal with. Obviously, I passed my interview, got on my course. My course was one of the biggest courses they've ever run. I can't remember how many people run it. I'm thinking between 25 and 30 people. We got 3 or 4 lads who were early 20s, couple at 21. Myself, I was round about 40, and you got everything in between. You got a couple of big lads, not many. There were 5 lasses on course. They were all from very different backgrounds, very different people. So it was a mix, Unfortunately, you looking at myself will probably think I look like a cliched prison officer. 6 foot, 17 and a half stone, bald head, yeah? When the fact is, maybe one of your flatmates, maybe one of their mothers, one of your aunties, an uncle, it's a mix. When you actually get in there, you've got everything from, maybe a 60-year-old lady who's a grandmum to sort of me and beyond. So, yeah, very, very difficult. The training itself, when you went into the prison, during training, they're taking you into the prison regular. Wow, so intimidating. They take your movement, so, you might have, you'd have wings. If I can explain, you'd have 6 wings going out, yeah, from a centre hub. So that centre hub is what you call, there's no prisoners in that area, but you would enter the 6 wings from that area. So there'd be A, B, C, D, E, F. So when these people went to work, you'd have an officer at the end of every wing who'd tick them off. They'd come out, and then they'd all filter up a main street about 5 metres wide to go to workshops, yeah? So when we used to go in the jail, the first time we went in, they stood us on that main street. So you probably got 400 prisoners, maybe 25 of us, and they just at you straight away. You might as well have target or victim tattooed on your head. They're straight in your face. Where you from, what you doing.
What's that like, being interrogated like that?
The people who are training said, just don't say anything, don't answer back. We just want to show you what it's like, movement or whatever. It's very difficult. But for me, I'm sort of thinking, wow, this ain't good. But then I'm also thinking, what's the 21-year-olds thinking? What are the lasses thinking? That sort of thing. So even though it weren't good, I'm sort of thinking, I'm in a better position than these people, sort of thing. It is very, very, very intimidating. Most prisoners, 24/7, thinking of things to do, how to intimidate you, how to condition you. It's the sort of thing they do.
So you went into the prison, and you mentioned there on the course that there are a variety of different types of prison officers. Some, like yourself, who kind of just did it as a job and went in for a wage, and you enjoyed it some parts, you didn't in others, but you did it. You saw it very much as a job. Others, in your book, it says that some might be there on a power trip, or some might be in there thinking that they can really help some of the inmates. What were some of the types of prison officers that you saw, and what was maybe some ineffective ones and effective types of prison officers?
There was me. There was an ex-rugby league player who was quite a big lad. There was a young lad called Ricky Barfoot, still friends with. He was only about 21. But I'll tell you how he got on. He got a good sense of humour. He was dry. He didn't take things personally. So obviously, he looked young, but I remember when he went into prison, he was a quick thinker, So if someone were having a go at him, he could inject a bit of humour or whatever. There were 3 very young lads who left within the first week. We had a prison officer who'd been in the job 25 years, come from the Isle of Wight, yeah? So there's 3 prisons on Isle of Wight. He'd been in 25 years, but his family lived in the northwest Manchester area. So he wanted to come back to his family, retire. You know, he sold his house up or whatever, so he couldn't get a job in the public sector and a transfer, so he thought, I'll go to a private sector prison. Remember the first day, dinner time, so we've done maybe 4 hours. Main Street, where all the movement were, like I told you, I'm walking one way, he's walking other. I said, are you alright? He says, yeah. I says, where are you off? He says, I've done. Never thought anything. That was him done. His first morning, you know, he had 4 hours, 25-year man, he was out of there. Sacked it off.
Yeah, you're talking about specific dangerous incidents there with inmates. Some, again, I keep having to refer to the book because that is, you know, your life story basically in a book, and we're just scratching the surface here, guys. For everyone watching, we're just scratching the surface. There are so many more stories in that book, but there, right at the start of it, you touch on a fella at Strangeways. So if you guys don't know, Sam spent a lot of your time at Strangeways Prison, which is one of the most dangerous prisons in England. Is that right? About right?
It's infamous, you know. If you talk about British prisons, you mentioned Strangeways, then,
yeah,
you know, most people will have heard of that, so
yeah, Sam spent a lot of his time there. I guess my first question before we get into the inmates is, what made Strangeways different to the rest?
Obviously, the image, you know, the riot, there was the riots, longest prison riot in history anywhere in the world, 1993. It was April Fool's Day, funnily enough. There was an incident in the chapel. There'd been a lot of sort of, how shall we say, unease in the prison due to the regime. It's quite a brutal regime. Quite a lot of time locked up. A bit of a planned affair, apparently. Bit of a protest. So it kicked off in the chapel. All prisoners are entitled to religion, yeah? So, despite your behaviour or whatever, whatever your faith, you know, if Muslims Friday, rest of your faith Sunday, you can go to chapel. So the chapel's full this day. The prisoners have made a bit of a plan to protest anyway. Very few officers inside the chapel during the service. So, you know, I'm only recounting this from what people said. You know, this might not be the whole case, but a couple of staff, you know, got battered. The prisoners got a set of keys. And that set off a chain of events that, you know, the prisoners then are sort of rioting, and that spread from the chapel. There's a few urban myths about the Strangeways riot, why it went on so long, why it was allowed to go on so long, which are, you know, apparently true. Within a very short period of time, maybe a couple of days, again, I'm just recalling it, you know, from what people have told me. It's all written there, you can Google it and find out, that they took a lot of the prison back from the prisoners. And then there was, from headquarters in London, the prison was told to withdraw all staff. So basically, they surrendered the prison to the prisoners. At that time in the prison, there was some work going on. There was scaffolding up. This allowed the prisoners easy access to the roof. So what it said was that in London at that time, they had the poll tax riots, your council tax or whatever. Being very young, you won't know about this, will you? So for anyone who's watching, right, council tax, poll tax, whatever you pay to your local council to live in your house, it had changed. The government had changed it at this time, and people were kicking off. So in London there were riots, and apparently they were bad. You know, police were getting hurt, public were getting hurt, there were violent clashes. However, for the next 30 days, all that was in the British media and world media was the Strangeways riot, longest riot in prison history. When they talk about a prison being a hard prison, like Strangeways being a hard prison when I went, it had a very strict regime. However, prisoners knew what they were getting. You know, it was sort of written in stone, so they knew how their day would go. A lot of experienced staff. It doesn't mean that everyone's my size going round knocking 7 bells out of people. Yeah? You know, when they say a tough prison, it means prisoners knew when they went there, if they overstep the mark, they're going to get restrained. but also, you know, it's had a system that worked, and you had to work with that system. If you kicked back, you were going to get punished. So it sort of had that reputation. And having come from Forest Bank, I did my prison officer training again. Very similar training. Not good. Don't prepare you. My life skills prepared me. The actual training we did, other than the CNR, where you taught to restrain prisoners, is just, it's very mundane. There's role play. There's lots of tests. You know, you do report writing, you do homework. Not good. It doesn't help you at all. The best thing you can do is get someone, for instance yourself, teach you how to restrain people, get you on a landing, get you used to being around prisoners. That's the best thing they can do.
You had a variety of obviously dangerous inmates then, and unpredictable inmates. As I said, the book starts off with a man who turns out uses an alias name, but Thomas Riley is the alias you use. And this is a man who was a self-harmer. And yeah, I mean, I'll let you take it away with it, because he's an interesting character. That's for sure.
Some of the worst people that I work, when I said worse, I said most difficult, are personality disorders. Now, we have mental health patients, and you got personality disorders. Now, personality disorders is a whole different ball game. They now come under the Mental Health Act. Somebody decided somewhere that someone who has a personality disorder should come under the Mental Health Act. That's debatable. You know, I've worked with people who've worked in mental health all their lives who said they're different people. Both equally difficult to work with, but you have to treat them in different ways. So Thomas Riley, it's very difficult, you know, not to say his real name.
Why do you not use his real name?
Right, okay. When we did the book, Thomas Riley, what I want to get across to you is how difficult he was to deal with, yeah? You know, he self-fires, he self-harm, but you don't need to know his name, yeah? I just need to get across that there's people like this who are like this.
What did Thomas Riley do?
Right, he was in for arson initially. I think he got a 3-year sentence. Arson is quite a serious offence. You know, they're classed as very dangerous people, arsonists, and they can also command quite high sentences. So this lad is a personality disorder. He's on the healthcare at Strangeways. He's got a history of setting fires. Before I went on the healthcare, he did himself some particularly nasty harm. What you have to understand about self-harmers is, when people talk about self-harmers, they always talk about manipulation. Yeah? So people self-harm to manipulate the system or get something out of it. This lad, no. If he got wound up, frustrated, angry, chop away at himself, set himself on fire. Yeah? Which inconveniences me, but he's not asking for anything. So the previous fire, I dealt with one, but the previous one, what he did, he tied his tracksuit bottoms up with his shoelaces. He had 2 bags of sugar, poured one in each leg of his tracksuit bottom, and set them on fire. Now, obviously, sugar melts. He spent a considerable time in hospital. His legs were a mess. One of his calf muscles were burnt away. It had gone. So, sorry, it's just how it is.
No, it's interesting.
So he did himself some damage, but that was of no concern to him. So I saw him cut himself quite badly. Again, I've got good knowledge with this prisoner. I'd worked with him. I knew how he worked. I knew when he got frustrated, how he would be. So there was 3 incidents, 2 self-harm incidents and a fire incident that I dealt with him. When you looked at him, he was covered in scars. Bad scars. You know, not, you know, deep. His arms were covered, you know, looked like chewing gum, some area of his arms and things like that. So on one occasion, he's upset. I can't remember why. I think he possibly wanted to move cell because he complained, because he was such a challenging prisoner. His cell was pretty much outside the office. If you come out of the staff office, his cell was there. We had him there, so people were constantly looking in on him, you know, as they went about the daily job. So he was complaining that on nights the night staff were keeping him awake, which they probably would. You know, even if you were quiet, you know, it'd be like, "Ah, that's in next room now." You know, she's going to hear me or whatever, especially with my booming voice. Anyway, he's upset. I'm talking to him. I'm not in his cell. On the healthcare, we had a hatch, probably 7 or 8 inches by about a foot, that you could drop down. So if someone was unwell, being extremely violent or whatever, you could pass things in and take things out without actually, you know, being in the cell with them. You know, you could pass meals in, or at night we used to give them. They didn't have hot water or kettles or anything, so you'd take the cup off them and I'd pass them a brew or whatever. So anyway, this particular day, you know, he's on one. He's got a razor blade. I'm talking to him. Anywhere in the prison, if somebody found someone self-harming, they would press an alarm bell. When there's an alarm bell, it comes over radios and all staff will head to that area, right? But I'm on the healthcare. I've got knowledge of this prisoner. I was on my own, so he's locked up. I'm talking to him. He's got a razor blade. You know, I'm like, "Thomas, you know, what's up?" He's on one. He's angry. He's frustrated. So he basically put 6 cuts down his arm. This isn't controlled. You know, it's not. He's basically down to wood. Full cuts, right down, opened up. Surprisingly enough, not a lot of blood. You would think it'd be gushing everywhere. Not a lot of blood. But you can see the flesh is opened up. He's got 6 cuts. So I go and get one of my managers who's a nurse. She's like, "Thomas, why have you done that? Go away. You know, leave me alone." Okay. If you want us to look at it, press your bell. So, you know, he's not wanting any attention. He's not wanting us to go in the cell. So I starts doing my paperwork. Then he presses his bell. "Yep, what's up, Thomas? I want to move cell." "Can't move your cell now. You know, we'll discuss it as a team. As it is for the time being, you're staying here." Okay, so again, this is a bit disgusting, but this is how it is, yeah? So what he has done is, shall we say, he's filled his toilet with a number 2. Yeah?
Yep.
So he scoops it out and he rubs it in his wounds.
Oh.
Now, if me or you had wounds like he had and they were untreated, there's a chance you're going to get blood poisoning or septicemia. If me or you did what he did, you know, put feces in them or whatever,
Yeah.
you're going to get blood poisoning, there's no doubt. So again, I fetched my manager. Over 2 weeks, these wounds obviously became quite nasty. His arm swelled. I won't describe it, but, you know, you could smell that it all wasn't well. A couple of doctors saw him at his cell. Again, we didn't go in, you know, through the hatch. He was offered antibiotics. He refused. We actually got a specialist in, a plastic surgeon from Wythenshawe Hospital. Wythenshawe Hospital in Manchester, you know, that's where all your footballers and that go, you know, if they're having plastic surgery or whatever. I have my own self-harm scale. You know, a lot of people talk about self-harm in prison and they generalise. So I use my own scale in the book. No one's ever commented on that, funny enough, but, you know, that was for me, and it's to get across to people like you. So a 1 to 4 is manipulation. So that might be superficial scratches, maybe getting a noose, saying you're going to hang yourself, that sort of thing. That'll be to get something, get a move off a wing where you're in debt or something else. That is minor. The vast majority of self-harm that's recorded will be on that level. So it's superficial. Now people can say I'm sort of what's the word you'd use? I'm making light of it.
Yeah.
Well, I've worked with these people, and, you know, someone come in with a few scratches they've done with a piece of metal on their arm. It's not life-threatening. For me, that is different to what Thomas Riley's doing. Then you've got a 5 to 8. Yeah, 5 to 8 on a scale. These are people who maybe have self-harmed for a long time. You know, it's become part of their life. You may well see physical scars. Not necessarily life-threatening. Yeah? Just, they might well cut themselves. They might cut themselves in private places. But, you know, if I go back to the women, a lot of women had sort of physical scars, yeah? And then you get your 9 or 10, like Thomas Riley. He wasn't trying to kill himself, but by his actions, he could well have died. Less than 1% of prison population, that may be 1 in 1,000 self-harm to that level. So, as you can see, big percentage is manipulation, and, you know, it's on a really light level, and then at the other end, very, very small percentage who it can be life-threatening. They may not intend to kill themselves, but by their actions. We've had people who've had no physical scars who used to let their own blood. So they might have a little tiny nick in the nook here, in the arm, and they would lose pints of blood. They would literally, you know, that in itself is very dangerous. Once your blood gets below a certain level, obviously blood pressure, things like that, but you're also at risk of heart attack.
For those that do really not only want to self-harm but don't want to live anymore, what was that like? Yeah, what was that like with the suicides in prison? Did you see any, and how did you try and prevent suicides from happening?
Right. You're never going to stop somebody who genuinely wants to kill themselves in prison. They'll wait till they've got an opportunity. I've seen that plenty. You know, we had one prisoner who I got quite close to because he was on the healthcare for around about 6 months. It might have been less. It seemed a long time, but daily contact with him. He was on what they call a 3-officer unlock protocol, which means he didn't come out with other prisoners because he posed a threat, and we only got him out with 3 staff. He'd been abused as a kid. He's what you call an IPP prisoner, indeterminate public protection. It's an horrendous sentence that it came in around about 2008, and I think by 2013 it stopped being used. And basically it's about risk. So someone could get an 18-month sentence, and this is actually true today. There's people who got 18 months and 15 years later they're still in prison. So they got 18 months for robbery and they're still in prison now as we talk. There's about 2,000 people stuck in this system on this horrendous sentence. Anyway, this lad I'm talking about, Craig, we'll use his first name, he's no longer with us, bless him. He was on an IPP sentence. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. You know, the light at the end of the tunnel, if you go to prison, is when the prison gives you a release date. Yeah? So, you know, you're getting out November the 16th in 18 months or whatever. IPP prisoners don't get that. So, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. He was abused as a kid, and he basically disowned his family. Now, we had him on healthcare. He said he was going to kill himself. I knew, you know, we had some not bizarre conversations, just very matter of fact. He says, you know, I'm going to kill yourself, Mr. Samworth, don't you? I said, I do, yeah. He said, I'm not going to do it on here. He says, I like you, I like the staff, you know. I respect the fact you've tried to help me. But one day, when I've moved off here and everyone's forgot about me, I'm going to take my own life. And he did. He moved off, and a month later, he killed himself on Sea-Wing, hung himself. He waited till his pad mate, I don't know, went to the gym or something. It's a quiet time on the wing, and he hung himself. So you get people like that who have lost the will, yeah? And it didn't matter what we'd have done for Craig. He would have taken his own. I honestly believe if he'd have got released from prison, he would have still taken his own life. And we've had people like that as well, who have tried to take their life in prison, they've been released, they've taken their own life. So there's people like that. We've had what you call death by stupidity. Again, this isn't making light of someone taking their own life in prison. We had one lad who pressed his cell bell. Every cell has an emergency cell bell, yeah? So you can press that bell, you know, if you feel unwell, whatever, when you're locked up, and someone will come within a couple of minutes, maybe within a minute, and ask you what the problem is. So this lad has pressed his cell bell, yeah? Maybe a minute later, the officer went to his door and he was hanging. Now, what they believed he did is he's pressed his bell, put a noose round his neck on the bars, and in Strangeways, they don't have radiators. They have a couple of pipes that run along the top of each other through the cell, and that's the heating. So he's put a noose round the bars, round his neck, he stood on the pipes, he's pressed his cell bell to bring a member of staff, yeah? They believe he's then slipped and hung himself. So by the time the member of staff's got there, by the time the troops have come, he's dead. You know, they tried to revive him, he's dead. That is what you would call death by stupidity.
What was it like when you have to? Did you ever find anyone? Obviously, these are very sensitive topics, but I think it's this is all in the book, and I think it's the most important thing to do is really portray what prison and being a prison officer was truly like. So, you know, the reality of it was you may have had to find someone who had either been killed or had killed themselves, and when you had, if you had, what was that like?
Not good. Found someone at Forest Bank hanging, and also at Strangeways on the healthcare. It's a shock to the system.
Yeah.
You know, it's. I tell you what makes things worse, right? There's two types of officers. There's officers, you know, who find something like that who will react. You know, you'll go in the cell, you cut someone down, do your CPR, try and bring back to life. There's people who will stand and look because they're in shock, or there's people who don't want to get involved. You know, either way or whatever, I'm not knocking anything like that. It has an impact on you. How that is managed, that incident, for me, can make things 10 times worse. You know, finding somebody dead is not good. If you've got a manager who's not understanding, and people stood around laughing and joking and having brews because it's a bit of a free time or whatever, then that can make something 10 times worse. And that was my beef with the prison service. Some managers just didn't manage it in a professional manner. For me, the prison service on that front is not good.
So in regards to, we talked about a variety of things there, but that started on suicides. I want to go through various topics throughout the prison and general sort of interests that I've had. If, you know, in prison, people go, one of the biggest thing is, he's going to get bummed when he goes in. He doesn't want to drop his soap. And I think, you know, that is the thing that people think of when they think of prison. I do. I think, you know, I wouldn't want to get stuck in the showers of some big fella, right? What is that like? Does that happen often? Is that a misconception?
Right, let me tell you. There are sexual assaults in prison. A lot of them not what you'd expect. Actual sort of sexual assaults, rapes are very rare in British prisons. And the ones that do occur are usually reported days after the incident, and there's very little you can do. Very little you can do. The other sort of assaults that are quite bad is in prison. There is one place where you and I can't search on anyone, and some prisoners are sexually assaulted and made to hold other people's drugs and phones within that cavity. That's probably the more frequent of the sexual assaults. There's
the idea of sort of like nature versus nurture, isn't it? Like, are these people genuinely bad people, or are they bad people because of the way they've been brought up? What do you believe? And if it is that that people are just products of their environment, have you ever met anyone who is like, this guy is evil, like this guy's bad to the core?
Yeah, there is some bad people. There's definitely bad people, whether you use the word evil or not or whatever. You know, some of the past these people go on. I'm sure they think they're never going to get caught or whatever. There's people that were despicable, you know, I wouldn't want to talk to or anything like that. Someone who is, you know, a violent paedophile or rapist or whatever, they're always going to be a danger. And how we manage them people in society, well, we don't manage them, you know. For me, somebody who is particularly a paedophile or whatever, they will be tagged for life. Yeah? So somebody could monitor them on GPS. If they went near a school or anything, you lock them back up. They're always going to be a danger. Armed robber, you know, people can change or whatever. I'm not distinguishing, you know, armed robbers will scare the shit out of people and probably violent people. But the harm that, you know, we should be protecting kids. And these people are not going to change. You know, you see programs in America and that, behavioural analysis unit and that. They've chemically castrated paedophiles on request, and they've been released, and they've continued, you know, to perpetrate these acts on kids. So,
in regards to then what the prison is for, we're talking about can people change and that sort of thing. There's the three separate arguments, I think, of one. Some people think it should be for rehabilitation. One, some people think that prison should be from protecting the society from these dangerous people. And three, prison should be for punishment of acts, right? And maybe there's an argument that it should be a balance of the three. What do you think prison should be? And regardless of what you think it should be, where is it in between those three?
Like where it is now, is prison's a punishment. You know, they don't go to prison to be punished. People I work with, staff, things like that, believe that, you know, they're there to punish people. The prison is punishment itself. As far as rehabilitation, I've got into I won't say arguments, because I put my side, debates or whatever, where people have blown the top. They've asked me about rehabilitation, and I sort of, standard answer, rehabilitation's what I had in my shoulder in 2012. I had a major operation. Rehabilitation was what the physio gave me, getting my shoulder moving again. Yeah, rehabilitation we're not rehabilitating no one. Yeah, so people will go off on one and say, so you're saying people can't change? No, I'm not saying that. People can change, but prison does not rehabilitate anyone. Maybe a small percentage, first time in, terrified, will never go back. Yeah, as far as the other one, what prison should be and where it is now, for me, you need some time out of cell. 23-hour bang up is not good. That's what they had in the 60s and 70s. That's what they're going back to now, because they haven't got enough staff. You need enough staff to run a regime, get prisoners out, send them to visits, take them to work, let them have showers and phone call. And you need enough staff to run that regime and deal with incidents, yeah, without having to lock people up. Purposeful activity, there's very little. They need some purposeful activity, yeah? I watch a lot of prison documentaries, sadly. Watching one the other day in Germany, so companies going into a youth prison. So a company, you know, a manufacturing company, they go into a youth prison, they set up a workshop, and they pay young prisoners to work a decent wage. They were getting 50 or 60 euros a week, which is a decent amount of money when you're in prison. You can spend it on canteen. And they were out of the cell most of the day, and they were working. You know, as much life as a real life routine, other than being locked in the room at the end of the day. There's very little. We have trainer prisons, yeah, where they might have decent workshops. One or two prisons might have some purposeful activity. On the whole, though, it doesn't happen. Strangeways, I always tell everyone, the best two workshops there, plastering shop, where you could learn to plaster, and the bricky shop, where you could learn to lay bricks. You come out with a qualification, you could leave prison, get a job, earn 400-500 quid a week. Both them shops were shut to make room for interview space. Yeah? Them two shops were always well attended, the lads loved it, and they got a skill. We need to look at improving some of our prisons. I mean, what I've suggested, if you look where Strangeways is, flatten it, yeah? All the land around it, prime land, it's just off Deansgate in Manchester, you know, you could sell that, you could build a big complex, retail, leisure. The money you would make from that, build a prison, easily accessible bike motorway, yeah? A more modern prison, more compact, clean and new, move all the staff, make it commutable, move all your staff and prisoners, job done, it'll pay for itself. That land has got to have a massive value. You know, all your inner city prisons the same. Ormley, Leeds Centre, yeah? Liverpool, flatten them, do away, build a new prison, move your staff and prisoners in.
Sam, I've got a list here, right? I was reading your book. And I really, genuinely, you know, you sent me over your book. I said, is there any way I can research you the best way? And you said, the book. The book is the best way. If you want to find out about me, read that. And so I'd recommend to everyone out there, I'll put it all in the description, everything. Read it, because there's some cracking stories in there. But I was reading it and I was genuinely getting invested. It wasn't preparing for an interview anymore. It was me reading for fun, right? And so I started making a list in preparation of some of the worst inmates that I think you came across, right? And I want you to tell me a little bit about them when I read their names. So the first one, Mark Bridger.
Right, Mark Bridger. He took a young lass, April Jones. She was very young. He told lies about what had happened. Initially, he said he'd run her over in his Land Rover, panicked, and drove her off and put her somewhere, you know. He probably did things far... He definitely sexually assaulted her. He was a paedophile. He'd murdered a young girl, which is horrendous. It was a very small village. It affected the village bad. You know, I've seen documentaries about her siblings, where her siblings have spoke about missing her, and her parents. So, you know, it's horrendous. Two things that stand out when I was looking after him, that rightly or wrongly made me smile, was one when he left Strangeways. Bear in mind, he'd been there 10 months on the healthcare small unit. He went to Wakefield Monster Mansion. Now Wakefield's got a reputation. So when I took him down to the Cat A reception to hand over to the Wakesteel staff, he was white, he was shitting himself and crying. I was going into work one day and someone tried to kill him in Wakefield. A violent rapist pinned him down and cut his throat. Sadly, again, some people might say, how can you say that? You know, he survived it. But for me, he's a reason they should have capital punishment.
Michael Kennedy is my next one. The fella set himself on fire, right? And he then attacked the female prison officer. You then had to go in and save him, and give him CPR. And it was a question of, you know, your colleague saying, why did you give him CPR?
Quite a bad fire, this. Usually, most fires are on healthcares, segregation units, where the bad boy, or special units. Within the prison system, there's a lot of special units, various names. So, it's one of two lads I'm thinking of. They were both badasses, both bad fires. What happened was, I'm walking past the cell to answer a cell bell. Now, like I said, normally, a bit of smoke, a fire alarm go off. Obviously, prisons, fire alarms everywhere. So I walked past this cell. Woo, could feel heat. Stopped. My mate, SO, shouted him. Pressed the alarm bell. I went to open the flap and have a look. Hot, the door is red hot. Got hose pipe, door. So we dragged him out. So I don't actually know how I'd done the fire. He had blocked round his door the gap with wet toilet paper. So no smoke had been getting out. The cell was full of smoke, black smoke. He was unconscious and his arms were burnt. They were almost like laid in the fire. So we dragged him out onto the landing, turned him over, started CPR. You know, I got a lot of stick for that. People are saying, oh, you know, he shouldn't have done it, let him burn or whatever. Well, that's all well and done. You know, if we'd have put the fire out and then took him out and had been dead, you know, we wouldn't have been in any trouble. You know, some people would say you shouldn't have gone in, it was dangerous, should have got rid of the smoke. You know, 100 different ways to deal with that. I'll tell you what he was in for now. He was in a road rage incident. He was a Liverpudlian, this lad, a Scouser. And what he did, somebody pulled out on him, an old couple. He forced them off the road, dragged the old guy out of the car, dragged him over the bonnet with his arm, tried to take his arm off at the shoulder with a machete. Had a good go. Then he dragged the old woman out, and then thankfully, public intervened and he was restrained and arrested. So this is a scumbag of the lowest level, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you talk there about the idea that some of the prison officers might have had the idea that I might stand back here and let that go. And obviously you didn't have that inclination. You were straight in, save life. That's what we're supposed to do. And that, regardless of who you are, save your life. But in regards to that sort of shady business with prison officers, you know, there's a lot of ideas about prison officers, some of them being corrupt, helping out the prisoners, all this sort of stuff. Did you see a lot of corruption? Did you see, you don't have to name names, but did you see a lot of backhanders going on?
A lot of people think everyone who is corrupt is a scumbag. For me, a lot of them are victims, they're naive, they're vulnerable. And there's no support. When I started at Forest Bank and Strangeways, even though I'd seen a lot in my life, there was a lot of experienced staff round. So the young people on my course, one of the lads was 21, he had experience around him all the time. Not so much now, you know. One of my mates who's just finished, I remember last shift he told me 5 female staff and him on a wing. You got a senior officer who'd been there a while, him, and then 4 lasses who were 19, 20, 21. You know, been in job 2 months, clueless. Prisoners just take the piss. It's a contact sport and it's a tough job and it's a stressful job.
Yeah, on the stressful nature of the job then, you were working, as you said, antisocial hours, you were up all night, up through, right from the crack of dawn to the end of the night, and that must have had a profound effect on your personal life. I mean, in the book it says that Strangeways is the sort of place where you walk in, and I quote, your heart sinks, because it is an awful place like that. What was that like walking in, and what effect did that have on your personal life?
Listen, you've got 1,200 prisoners who don't want to be there. And most of the staff, it's a negative environment. Prison is always going to be a negative environment. You work hours for money in the belief that you're doing some good. We got nothing out of it, you know. It just puts a distance between you and the family and that sort of thing. So, you know, it's always going to be a negative environment. That's never going to change.
Yeah, and so you said you still struggle from that in regards to the post prison era, if you will, in regards to Sam or Neil Samworth. Have you ever met an inmate post prison and they're out of prison now, and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, how you doing, Mr. Samworth? And it's all fine. What was that like?
Call them ex-customers, you know, so there's no stigma. I've got, I don't know, half a dozen who are good friends now. Contacted me through the book. You know, sent me emails, contacted me agent or whatever. So yeah, I've seen absolutely shitloads, mate. No bother. You know, some of them are good friends now.
Yeah. Well, Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show today, pal. It's been an eye-opening conversation. I think for everyone at home, I've absolutely got a sort of peek through the keyhole of Strangeways Prison and Forest Bank and all those sorts of things. So first of all, I want to say a big thank you for coming on the show, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Welcome.
and guys, remember, I've got it here. Oh, here we go. I've got it here, right? You see this here? Strangeways by Neil Samworth. Sam, it will be in the description, right? All the links will be there. Get over. We've literally just scratched the surface of this book. I'm over 3/4 way through, and he sent it to me like a couple of days ago. It is enthralling. It is gripping. Get on it. And yeah, do us all a big favour. Do Sam a big favour and go over and buy the book. So cheers all for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you guys soon.